The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was replacing the seals on the kitchen faucet. I had the counter covered with towels and my hands smelled like rubber and mineral deposits when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. The area code was local, which made me pause. Scammers usually spoofed numbers from out of state. I dried my hands and answered, "Dad?" 10 years compress into a single breath when you hear a voice you'd stopped expecting. My son's voice had deepened, matured into something that belonged to a man I'd never met. I stood very still in my kitchen, looking at the disassembled faucet, and said nothing. "Dad, it's Marcus. I know it's been a while. I need to talk to you about something important." The last time I'd seen my son, he was 19 and walking out of my house with 2 duffel bags and his mother's righteous fury as armor. That was 3 months after the divorce finalized. He'd chosen sides without hesitation, and I'd let him go because forcing someone to stay never works. I'd sent birthday cards for the first 5 years. They came back unopened after year 3. "I'm listening," I said. He exhaled, a sound that might have been relief or calculation. "Can we meet? There's something I need your help with, something big." I set the wrench down on the towel with care. My pulse stayed even. "What kind of help?" "Better in person. Are you free Thursday? There's a coffee place on Meridian, near the library." I waited 3 seconds before answering, long enough to let the silence settle. "Thursday works." After he hung up, I stood in my kitchen for another minute, looking at the faucet pieces arranged on the counter like evidence. Then I finished the repair. The seals were old and cracked. When I turned the water back on, nothing leaked. I'm 52 now, though people often guess younger until they look at my hands. I'd built my first company at 28, with a partner who understood code better than people and a credit line that terrified us both. We sold 7 years later for enough money that I never had to make another pitch deck. My second venture failed cleanly. No debts, no drama, just a product the market didn't want. After that, I'd consulted for a while, then stopped when I realized I was doing it out of habit rather than need. These days, I fix things. The house mostly, sometimes for neighbors who know I have time. I read in the mornings and walk in the evenings. My hands stay busy. The solitude fits well enough. The divorce had been civil in the legal sense, which meant lawyers negotiated the split while my ex-wife and I communicated through intermediaries about furniture and bank accounts. She'd wanted out, and I'd seen no point in contesting what couldn't be salvaged. Marcus had been 17, old enough to form his own conclusions, and young enough to trust his mother's version of events without question. She'd painted me as absent, consumed by work, emotionally, unavailable. It wasn't entirely untrue, though the full picture was more complicated than her narrative allowed. I'd tried to reach him after he left, but he'd blocked my number and filtered my emails. By year 6, I'd stopped trying. You can't force someone to hear you. Thursday morning, I drove to the coffee place he'd suggested. It was one of those deliberately rustic spots with reclaimed wood tables and a chalkboard menu that required translation. I arrived 15 minutes early and took a corner seat with a clear view of the entrance. Old habits. The coffee was decent. Marcus walked in 12 minutes late. He looked like me at 30, same build, same way of scanning a room before committing to movement. He'd dressed carefully, business casual with new shoes. His handshake was firm, practiced, the kind you learn at networking events. "Thanks for coming," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "You said it was important?" He nodded, ordered an espresso from the server who appeared with efficient timing, then leaned forward with his forearms on the table. "I'm launching a company, software platform for supply chain optimization, AI-driven analytics, really cutting-edge stuff. We've got a solid prototype, initial user testing is phenomenal, and we just closed our seed round." I kept my face neutral. "Congratulations. The thing is, we're moving into Series A now, bigger investors, institutional money. And there's this one detail we need to clean up to close the round." He paused, watching me. "I need you to co-sign some documents. Technically, you're still listed as a guarantor on my student loans, and the lead investor wants that resolved before they wire the funds. It's just a formality, takes 10 minutes, but without it, the whole deal stalls." I took a sip of my coffee. Let the silence stretch. His espresso arrived, and he added sugar without looking at it. "You haven't called in 10 years, I said finally. Not for holidays, not when your grandfather died. Not once. His jaw tightened slightly. I know, and I'm sorry about that. Things were complicated after the divorce. Complicated? Mom needed support, you know how it was. I know she chose a story and you believed it. He shifted in his seat, a micro-expression of discomfort quickly smoothed over. Look, I'm not here to relitigate the past. I'm asking for your help with something that affects my future, our whole team's future. We've got 12 employees counting on this. I studied his face. He had his mother's eyes, quick and assessing, always calculating advantage. The earnestness in his expression was well rehearsed, but didn't quite reach those eyes. What exactly do you need me to sign? Relief flickered across his features. Just a release form and an amended guarantee statement. My lawyer's already drawn everything up. We can meet at his office tomorrow if you're free. Send me the documents first. I'll have someone review them. Dad, we're on a timeline here. The investor's wire deadline is Friday. Then you should have called 3 weeks ago. He sat back and something harder appeared beneath the polished exterior. So that's how it's going to be? You're going to punish me for not reaching out sooner by putting my company at risk? I'm going to read what I'm signing. That's not punishment. That's sense. We looked at each other across the reclaimed wood table. Other conversations hummed around us. The espresso machine hissed. Someone's phone chimed with notifications. Marcus picked up his cup and drank, giving himself time to recalculate. Fine, he said. I'll send everything over today, but I really need an answer by tomorrow night. What's the company called? Chainlink Analytics. And your role? CEO and founder. I've got a strong technical co-founder and a VP of product who's ex-Google. We're positioned really well. I nodded slowly. I'll look at the documents. After he left, I sat with my cooling coffee and thought about timing. 10 years of silence, then an urgent request time to create pressure. The story was smooth, practiced, probably true in its basics, but something about the delivery felt engineered. That evening, I called Daniel, who'd been my lawyer since the first startup. He was semi-retired now, mostly playing golf and occasionally consulting for old clients who'd become friends. Can you look at some documents for me? I asked. Should be coming through tonight. My son needs me to sign off on something related to his student loans. Marcus reached out? That's good news. Maybe? Can you just tell me what I'm actually signing? Of course. Send them when they arrive. The email came at 9:47 that night. 3 PDFs, professionally formatted, a cover letter from a law firm I didn't recognize, a guarantee release form, and something called an amended personal security agreement. I forwarded everything to Daniel without reading past the first page. He called me the next morning before I'd finished my coffee. Don't sign anything, he said. His voice had the edge that came from years of reading contracts designed to obscure rather than clarify. What am I looking at? The release is standard, but that security agreement isn't about student loans. It makes you personally liable for company debts up to $2 million. If this venture fails, and statistically most do, you're on the hook for anything the business can't cover. They've structured it to look like loan paperwork, but it's a guarantee for business financing. I set my mug down carefully. Why would investors require that? They wouldn't. This is something else entirely. My guess is your son's having trouble getting traditional funding and needs personal guarantees to secure a loan. He's probably been turned down by several banks already. The Series A story might be true, but this document is about covering a gap in his current financing, not clearing up old student debt. Would signing this affect anything else? If the company goes under and there's outstanding debt, creditors would come after your assets. Your house, savings, anything not protected. Given your net worth, you'd be an attractive target. After Daniel hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the morning light coming through the window. The garden outside needed weeding. The deck needed staining. I'd been planning to tackle both this weekend. Instead, I opened my laptop and started searching. Finding information about Chainlink Analytics took less time than I expected. They had a website, slick and professional, with stock photos and vague promises about revolutionizing supply chains. The About Us page listed Marcus as CEO with a headshot that looked expensive. 2 other team members were named, no bios, just titles. The blog had 3 posts from 4 months ago, then silence. I found them listed on a startup database that tracked funding rounds. They'd raised $80,000 in seed funding 11 months ago from something called Meridian Venture Collective. That was far below what most software companies needed to reach Series A. No other funding rounds were listed. Meridian Venture Collective had a website too, minimal design. 3 portfolio companies including Chainlink. Their Contact Us page listed an address in a shared office building downtown. I'd been in that building before. It was where people rented desks by the month and called themselves incubators. I ran a business name search through the state database. Chainlink Analytics LLC had been registered 14 months ago, with Marcus listed as the registered agent. I pulled up the formation documents and found something interesting. There were 3 members listed on the original filing: Marcus, someone named Trevor Moss, and someone named Jennifer Colvin. By the time of the seed round, according to the startup database, only Marcus and Trevor Moss remained. I searched Jennifer Colvin's name with Chainlink Analytics and found a single result: a LinkedIn profile that listed her employment there for only 3 months before moving to a marketing position at an established tech firm. Her skills included product management and startup operations. Under recommendations, someone had written, "Jennifer brought structure and insight to our early days, and we're sorry to see her go." That phrasing. Sorry to see her go instead of wishing her well in new endeavors. I'd written enough corporate speak to recognize the difference. I found Trevor Moss next. His LinkedIn was more detailed. Stanford CS degree, 3 years at a large tech company, then CTO at Chainlink. His profile photo showed someone in his late 20s with the careful neutrality of a professional headshot. He'd posted regularly about technical challenges and industry trends until about 6 months ago, then stopped. I spent the rest of the morning following threads. Marcus's own LinkedIn painted a story of ambition and hustle. 3 startup positions before launching Chainlink, each lasting less than a year. Before that, a state university degree in business, graduated 6 years ago. The timeline felt compressed, packed with moves that suggested restlessness or something less generous. By afternoon, I'd compiled a simple picture. A young company, probably struggling, burning through limited seed money, and now desperate for additional funding. The Series A story might be aspirational at best, and my son needed me to guarantee his next loan because no bank trusted the company's prospects on their own merits. I made dinner, grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, and ate at the table while reading through my notes. The phone rang while I was washing dishes, Marcus calling right on schedule. "Did you look at the documents?" he asked. No greeting, just urgency. I did. "So can we meet tomorrow to sign? My lawyer can notarize everything." I had my lawyer review them. He advised against signing. Silence on his end, the kind that carries recalibration. "What do you mean advised against it?" "The security agreement makes me personally liable for your company's debts. That's not about student loans. That's about you needing someone to guarantee business financing. It's standard practice for early-stage companies. All the partners are required to have family guarantees. It's just how Series A investors protect their downside." "That's not true, Marcus. Series A investors write checks based on business metrics and growth potential. They don't require founders' parents to co-sign loans." His voice shifted, frustration bleeding through the polish. "So you're really going to torpedo this for me? After everything, you're just going to let my company fail because you won't help?" "I'm not letting anything fail. I'm declining to guarantee your business debts. Those are different things." This is unbelievable. I finally reach out after all these years, ask for one thing, and you turn me down. You were never there when I was growing up, and now, when I actually need you, you're still not there. I dried my hands slowly, methodically. You didn't call because you needed me. You called because you needed my credit. That's not fair. Neither is lying about what you need me to sign. He hung up. I finished the dishes and went outside to look at the garden. The evening air was cool, comfortable. A neighbor waved from across the fence and I waved back. Normal life continuing. That night I couldn't sleep easily. I kept thinking about the conversation, about the anger in his voice at the end. Not hurt exactly. Anger. The specific rage of someone who'd been counting on something and found the door locked. I got up and made tea, sat in the living room with just one lamp on. The house was quiet in a way that used to bother me but didn't anymore. I'd learned to distinguish between loneliness and solitude. They weren't the same thing. Around midnight, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into Facebook, the account I'd kept but rarely checked. My ex-wife's profile was still public. I scrolled through, looking for mentions of Marcus. She posted frequently, photos of her new life, a remarriage 3 years ago, vacation shots from places I'd never been. Marcus appeared occasionally in the early photos, then less often, then not at all for the past 18 months. I found one post from 8 months ago, vague but pointed. Sometimes the hardest lesson is learning that you can't save someone from their own choices. Sending strength to all the parents out there who understand. 47 sympathetic reactions, a dozen comments offering support. I searched deeper, switching to Google with specific terms. Marcus Fielding and lawsuit returned nothing. Same with fraud or investigation. But Marcus Fielding and fired gave me something unexpected. A local business journal article from 14 months ago about a small startup that had parted ways with its VP of sales amid differences in strategic vision. The company wasn't named, but the timeline matched one of Marcus's listed positions. The more I looked, the more the story came into focus. Not criminal, nothing actionable, just the pattern of someone who burned bridges and moved on before consequences caught up. 3 startups before his own, each departure carefully worded, but suggesting friction. A seed round that barely registered in industry databases. A co-founder who'd left quietly. And now, a desperate grab for guaranteed financing, dressed up as filial reconciliation. Friday morning, I called Trevor Moss. His cell number was listed on the Chainlink website under Contact the Team. He answered after 3 rings, cautious. "This is Trevor. My name is Richard Fielding. I'm Marcus's father. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Long pause. "About what?" "About your company. I'm considering investing, and I'd like to hear about it from the technical side." Another pause, then a careful, "Sure. What would you like to know?" "How's the product development going? I saw on the website that you're working on supply chain optimization." "We've got a solid proof of concept. The architecture is sound. We're running into some challenges with data integration, but that's expected at this stage." "What's your burn rate?" He exhaled, the sound of someone deciding whether to be honest. "We're trying to extend our runway. The seed money got us through initial development, but we need more to hit the metrics for Series A." "Is there a Series A in the works?" "Marcus has been talking to investors. It's early-stage conversations, nothing formal yet." "But you need funding before that." "Yeah, we're looking at bridge financing options." "Trevor," I said, keeping my voice even, "has Marcus asked you to have family members co-sign any loans for the company?" The silence that followed told me everything. Finally, "My dad said no. Marcus was pretty upset about it." "Did he tell you he's asking me?" "He mentioned he was reaching out to you. Said it was just a formality, that you were already on some paperwork from his college days." "That's not accurate. He wants me to personally guarantee up to $2 million in business debt." Trevor said nothing for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I didn't know the amount was that high." "How much did he ask your father to guarantee?" $500,000. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I sat with what I'd learned. Marcus wasn't just desperate. He was running a coordinated campaign, targeting multiple sources, tailoring his pitch to each mark. His father, who'd been absent, his business partner's father, who was present, anyone with decent credit and exploitable guilt. Saturday, I drove downtown to the shared office building where Meridian Venture Collective was supposedly located. The directory in the lobby listed them on the 3rd floor. I took the elevator up and found a hallway lined with doors bearing the names of companies I'd never heard of. Meridian's door was locked. Through the narrow window, I could see a small room with a desk, 2 chairs, and nothing else. No computers, no papers, no signs of actual use. The office next door had someone inside. I knocked and a young woman answered, looking harried and holding a phone. "Sorry to bother you," I said. "Do you know if anyone from Meridian Venture actually works here?" She glanced at their door. "The guy who rented that office comes in maybe once a month. I think it's just for mail. Are you looking to invest?" "Just doing research," she nodded, already turning back to her own chaos. "Good luck. Most of these microfunds are just one person with a website. I spent Saturday afternoon documenting everything: printouts of websites, screenshots of LinkedIn profiles, notes from my conversations with Daniel and Trevor Moss, the incorporation documents, the timeline of Marcus's employment history. I organized it all in a folder, not because I planned to use it, but because creating order from confusion was how I thought clearly. Sunday morning, Marcus called again. I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad, I need you to reconsider. The wire deadline got extended to Monday, but that's final. After that, we lose the funding and probably the company." "I'm not going to sign those documents, Marcus." "You're really going to do this? You're going to let everything I've built collapse because you're still bitter about the divorce?" "This isn't about the divorce. It's about you asking me to risk everything I have on a company that's not viable enough to get traditional financing. You don't know anything about my company. You haven't been part of my life for 10 years. You don't get to judge what I've built." I stood up from the kitchen table and walked to the window. The garden was green, the morning light soft. "You're right. I don't know your company, but I know you called 3 days before a critical deadline and lied about what you needed. I know you asked Trevor's father for money too, and he also declined. I know Meridian Venture is one person renting an empty office downtown. I know Jennifer Colvin left your company after 3 months, and that your LinkedIn shows a pattern of short tenures and uncomfortable departures." Silence. Then, lower. "You investigated me? You asked me to guarantee $2 million. Of course I investigated. This is insane. You're my father. You're supposed to support me, not spy on me and sabotage my chances. Support isn't the same as enabling bad decisions. If your company is solid, you'll find actual investors. If it's not, you'll learn and do better next time. But I'm not going to bankrupt myself to delay that lesson. I'll never forgive you for this." "That's your choice," I said, just like reaching out only when you needed something was your choice. He hung up without another word. I set the phone down and stood at the window for a while longer, watching a neighbor walk his dog, watching the ordinary Sunday morning continue around me. Monday came and went. No calls, no emails. I repaired the loose hinge on the back gate and refinished the deck stairs. Tuesday, I drove to the hardware store for wood stain and ran into an old colleague who asked if I'd consider consulting on a project. I said I'd think about it. Wednesday evening, Daniel called. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "I got a call today from Marcus's lawyer asking if you might reconsider. I told him you'd been clear about your decision and that if he contacted you directly, I'd consider it harassment." "Thank you." "He mentioned the funding fell through. They're looking at shutting down." "That's unfortunate." "Richard, you did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel good, but you did exactly right." After we hung up, I sat on the back deck and watched the sun set behind the trees. The air smelled like cut grass and charcoal from someone grilling nearby. I thought about Marcus as a boy, before the divorce, before the choosing of sides. He'd been sharp even then, quick to find angles, always negotiating for advantage. I'd seen it as intelligence. His mother had seen it as promise. Neither of us had seen it clearly. 3 weeks later, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "About Marcus." I opened it carefully, expecting anger or accusation. Instead, it was from Trevor Moss. "Mr. Fielding, I wanted to let you know that Chainlink is officially dissolved. We ran out of money and couldn't secure the bridge financing we needed. I'm not writing to blame you. In fact, I wanted to thank you for being honest about your concerns. After you and I talked, I started asking harder questions. I found out Marcus had been taking a salary twice what we'd agreed on and had charged personal expenses to the company card. When I confronted him about it, he said it was founder's prerogative and that I didn't understand how startups work. That's when I decided to cut my losses. I've got a job lined up at a real company now, stable work with actual paychecks. Sometimes the best thing someone can do is say no. I think you saved me from a much more expensive lesson. Thank you." I printed the email and added it to the folder, then closed the folder and put it in the filing cabinet where I kept old tax returns and other documents I'd never need to look at but couldn't quite throw away. The days continued, ordinary and sufficient. I finished the deck project and it looked good, solid, the kind of work that would last. A neighbor asked if I'd help her teenage son with a college essay about resilience. I said yes. The essay was rough but had good bones. We worked on it together for 3 afternoons, and by the end, he'd found something true to say. I stopped checking Marcus's LinkedIn profile. Whatever he did next wasn't my concern, and monitoring his trajectory would help neither of us. I'd offered him something once, years ago, a relationship built on presence and honesty. He'd rejected it. This time he'd offered me something transactional and temporary. I'd rejected that. We were even, in the way that clean boundaries make people even. Sometimes in the evening, sitting on the deck with a book and a glass of water, I'd think about what might have happened if I'd signed those papers. The company probably still would have failed. Marcus would have blamed me for not doing enough, or for doing too much, or for the timing being wrong. And I'd be $2 million poor with nothing gained except the confirmation that buying access to someone's life never works. Instead, I had this: a quiet house that stayed repaired, neighbors who waved, time to read and think, and the particular satisfaction that comes from knowing what you'll tolerate and what you won't. The line between helping and enabling isn't always clear, but this time it had been obvious. He'd needed money. I'd needed respect. Neither of us was willing to provide what the other wanted. That was okay. Some distances exist for good reasons. Some silences are healthier than forced conversation. I'd learned that slowly over the decades since Marcus left. Now I knew it bone deep. The phone stayed quiet. The seasons changed. I found other projects, other ways to stay useful. The door remained open if he ever wanted to walk through it honestly, but I wasn't holding it ajar or sending invitations. That part was finished. I'd given him what I could, not money, not blind support, but the example of a man who knew his worth and wouldn't compromise it for the comfort of feeling needed. Whether he'd ever understand that or value it wasn't mine to control. I'd done my part by refusing to do what he'd asked. Sometimes that's all a father can offer, the refusal to participate in his child's mistake, and the steady presence of someone who will still be standing when the dust settles. The deck looked good in the evening light. The repairs held. That was enough.